Okay, we're on page 81, still in the Lively Encounters chapter, although it's coming to an end very quickly. These, of course, are not a complete record of all the encounters that the Sixth Patriarch had with his disciples. It's only, obviously, a partial record. Maybe some of the more interesting ones weren't even recorded, or nobody was there to hear them. As you can tell, sometimes, as with Hongren and Hui Neng, much of what was exchanged there was done in private, obviously because of jealousy and so forth, and then he had to flee for his life after that encounter. We know a good deal of what was said because Hui Neng related that, but there could be encounters that happened, very interesting, very profound, and we have no record of, for all those various reasons. I'm going to try to get to two tonight because they're very similar. One, they're similar because they're short, but they're also similar because there's a change of, I'd say a change of pace, there's a change of content and quality. Prior to this, we've had encounters where people were either quite confused and came and he helped straighten them out, were mildly confused and he just did a couple tweaks, and sometimes only a bit confused, just one thing they just didn't have right, and he untied that knot and they were on their way. These two encounters tonight, you could read as there's no confusion whatsoever. Well, thank you. In other words, Chan Master Xing Si and Chan Master Hui Rong either directly now understand for themselves, and they're just coming to really have their understanding certified or validated, in a sense, by the Sixth Patriarch. Or, I would say that. I think when we read this, we realize, there isn't much confusion here. It's a very different type of exchange. And sometimes now the exchange, when we read them, you think, wait a minute, what was that about? The previous one is, you don't bow, that shows you're arrogant, and you're reciting without practicing, that shows this. And these exchanges, sometimes people call this Chan repartee or Zen repartee. There doesn't seem to be a serious exchange or an exchange that's such that you can diagram and say, here's the argument that took place. There was this syllogism, this presentation, this counter-argument, and then a conclusion. It almost seems like they're playing. But behind that seeming playfulness, there's actually some serious intent and testing going on. So let's dive into these a little bit. We'll just go into the first one. It says, Chan Master Xing Si was born to the Liu family of Anchang in Ji province. Hearing about the flourishing influence of the Sao Qi teaching, he went directly to visit and pay his respects. He asked, how can someone avoid falling into the gradual stage-by-stage way of practice? The master said, this is Hui Neng said, what were you practicing before coming here? He replied, I didn't even work on the Four Noble Truths. The master said, then what stage could you fall into? He then said, if one isn't practicing the Four Noble Truths, could there be any stages? The master was deeply impressed by Xing Si and made him head of the assembly. One day, the master said to him, you should now go and teach elsewhere. Never let the teaching die out. Having realized the Dharma, Xing Si returned to Green Mountain Highlands, this is called Qingyuan Shan, in Ji province, where he spread the teaching and influenced many to change. After his death, he was given the posthumous title Chan Master, vastly liberating Hongji. Okay, so here's the first one, very short. You don't have, he bowed and he wept and he suddenly had a realization or anything like that. He comes in, and you can imagine First you have the illiterate Hui Neng comes in, and he gets the robe and bowl, and off he goes. And this person now comes in, and there's this exchange, and you're trying to think, well, was he disrespectful? Was he respectful? Or whatnot? Now he's the head of the assembly. So this means he walks in front of everybody else. It's an honored position, and it's actually breaking some of the precedent. In this case, it is actually giving honor to someone not based on their seniority, necessarily their years, but in a sense that they're closest to the understanding of the Sixth Patriarch himself. So this, I don't know what this provoked among the people there, but it must have been. And you can imagine from listening to this exchange, they didn't get, why was he made head of the assembly? How did he score? Because it's not obvious from this exchange, that he had any profound understanding except the master's response to him. Not only did he respond to him and didn't challenge him, but he quickly recognized something and then made him head of the assembly. So let's unpack this a little bit. The Sao Chi teaching, what's that? The Sao Chi teaching. You should know that by now. I'm just trying to see if everybody's on board here. Sao Chi? Anybody? Sao Chi? Is it a place? It is a person? Is it a philosophy? Animal, vegetable, mineral? What's Sao Chi? Huh?
It's a place.
It's a place. Okay, and why do they say the Sao Chi teaching? What is Sao Chi associated with? It's a creek, right? Literally it's an area, but it's named after the creek that flows through there. See, sometimes they use mountains and creeks and valleys to refer to not only places, but emanations where teaching takes place. And so you could say like, he came to get the Berkeley teaching. What's the Berkeley teaching? It's what's being taught in a particular line that's very much associated with Berkeley, or the Boston teaching, or the Atlanta teaching, if there is such a thing. So this is Sao Chi. What's it referring to? Come on, don't be shy. Just jump in. It's a creek. Remember he says, this has the flavor of Sao Chi. The water here has the flavor of Sao Chi. No?
It's the Sixth Patriarch's Monastery.
Okay, great. This is the Sixth Patriarch's Monastery associated with this area. So it's basically he's going for the teaching of Hui Neng. And this has now become the Sao Chi school, or the Sao Chi teaching. He pays his respects and then immediately asks, how can I avoid falling into... what he's probably really asking is, how do I do this direct teaching? He's saying it inversely. How do I avoid this? But he really is asking, how do I do this direct teaching? And the master answers with him, what were you practicing before you came here? Now this is very interesting because he replies, I didn't even work on the Four Noble Truths. So why would he say that? Anybody? Why would he say, I didn't even work? In other words, what were you practicing? He was saying, I wasn't even practicing the most basic thing, the Four Noble Truths. So he should be now scolded, reprimanded, and put into Buddhism 101, right? Because he's not doing anything. He hasn't even mastered he hasn't cultivated. I didn't even work on the Four Noble Truths. What does the master say? Well, then what stage could you fall into? Meaning, these are stages that you take the Four Truths in the Eightfold Path, and you develop a series of progressive stages of cultivation. But he's saying, indirectly, he's saying to him, if you're not practicing the Four Truths, then you're not in that stage thing. But that doesn't mean anything. Again, if you look at this, it could be like, you're a failure. What stage? You're not even going to fall into stages because you're not doing anything. But that's not what he's saying. This is very interesting. So hidden behind here, there's something going on that he's affirming in him. What is that?
The master didn't have any formal training either.
He didn't have any formal training, which is true. But at the same time, how does this answer show a superior level of understanding? Or what? In other words, if you let's go see this. It's right now. You could take this. Somebody comes to Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, and you say, "How can I really do I really can do the teaching?" And somebody says, "What were you practicing?" "Well, I wasn't practicing anything, not even the Four Noble Truths." And you can say, "Okay, so we better get you." No, we're not even going to go to the basics. And you say, "Well, isn't that unstaged?" In other words, aren't you doing unstaged? So he's obviously done or doing something that is already not staged. Because he's saying, what would you fall into then? Go on. If one isn't practicing the Four Truths, could there be any stages? Okay, so you can look at this as being really contradictory. Someone who is obviously just clever with words and not really practicing. Remember, I guess, did we do
No.
little
It's the
boy
next
yet?
chapter.
Oh, the next chapter. The next boy is really good. Because the next chapter, the little boy comes, Shen Hui, right? Shen Hui comes, and he does basically exchanges like this, and he gets scolded severely. And this person comes in and does. So you can think, I'm going to try this. I'm going to go to some place where there's an enlightened master. I'm going to go in and say, how can I do the great direct teaching? And he said, well, you're practicing. I wasn't even practicing the Four Noble Truths. And you might get kicked out, or you might get scolded. But why does this work? I'm going to suggest something. And he says he was very impressed. He made him head of the assembly. It isn't just in this dialogue that you look for what's going on here. In between these lines, there's a lot going on that we have to interpolate. We have to read into that in order for this to work. He comes in, he obviously has been cultivating. We can tell that he gets a point. So what is the Sixth Patriarch then picking up on? Is it just these words? Obviously not. What I'm trying to hint at here is because the Sixth Patriarch is a very highly accomplished teacher, he's able to see the potentials and the realities of anybody who's in front of him. He's reading very carefully, like a very skilled doctor. He can diagnose just by a glance. Moreover, he has the ability to know the thoughts, the inclinations, potentials. You can see this in these early exchanges. He just goes right to the heart every time. That's not so easy to do. You can get somebody come in and ask a question, you go round and round and round. Why are you a vegetarian? Blah, 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 blah. And you go blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't get anywhere. And then you want someone who's really skilled saying, just because you don't know why you aren't, I know why I am, or something. And suddenly that person has something turn. That's not just clever words. It's not something you can just study. You can study all these exchanges and you still meet somebody and you still go around in circles. It's not a kind of memorization of different conversations, but rather it's an immediacy, unmediated seeing of potentials, where those knots are, and directly responding. Moreover, I would say it's also seeing the good roots and the virtue and qualities of a person. So I'm suggesting here, this is my interpretation, that when this Sing Si person comes in, he has a demeanor and I don't know what else you want to call it, like a sense of character. I'm not going to use far out words like aura or anything like that, but he obviously has a embodiment of virtue and character and probably all the qualities you associate with someone who is cultivating themselves. He's in control of his senses. He's not easily rattled. He doesn't put on a show. He doesn't put out vibes like pay attention to me, call attention to himself. All of these qualities you might associate with someone who is actually totally self-reliant in the best sense of that, not seeking anything, would have qualities of character that we could see. We wouldn't know exactly what that was from, but you, in the presence of a person like that, you can feel it. You see it. Now, the exchange just confirms what I think the Sixth Patriarch already had seen. If this is all they had in exchange, it certainly just isn't this two sentences back and forth that made him assess him in this way. He was obviously seeing a great potential. And it could be in the manner he was doing. For example, if it was just repartee, like pushing hands, there's almost a little, I would call it a Buddhist Bruce Lee thing. There's a little vibe like, I'm pushing now, and pushing back. Obviously they had this exchange and there wasn't any edge or hook like that for the Sixth Patriarch to pick up where he was putting out. So it was coming from a confidence, but not a cockiness. You'd have to read into this all these things that was going on in order for this exchange to work beyond just the words itself. Unfortunately, we're only left with the words. But close imaginative reading, I don't mean sort of imagination in the sense of fantasy, but close imaginative reading must be, you see the situation, it's almost like you create a movie out of it, and you, in that movie, seeing how you tell them to play. No, you're too cocky. It's not about cockiness. You're not challenging the Sixth Patriarch. When you come in, you're not immediately drawn to the kitchen. Like what's the good... There's this aplomb, there's this control that you have, and you get the actor to generate this so that when that exchange happens, you feel that this is almost an exchange between equals. And this is pretty close to being equal. I mean, he couldn't give him a higher position except to replace himself. Okay. And then one day the master said, now this to me is very interesting. You should now go and teach elsewhere. Why? Because he's really good, and the Sixth Patriarch's getting a little jealous and threatened. Oh, no. Right? Or he's testing him. Do you think you're ready to go? It doesn't seem to be any of that. Why would he then send him away? I mean, he made him head of the assembly. You would think that he has a very positive presence in the monastery. Why does the Sixth Patriarch say, you should now... And he doesn't say, go. He doesn't say, go and get out of here. He says, go and teach elsewhere, and then never let the teaching die out. I mean, one can interpret this only as this is almost like a Dharma body of Hui Neng. This is Hui Neng's vows embodied in this person going forward. And he trusts him so much that he knows wherever he goes that this teaching, as long as he's alive, it will be alive. So this is pretty powerful. But it's also the exhortation on the Bodhisattva side, which is to go out and share this now with others. Don't just simply... So the Sixth Patriarch in this is very interesting. He's not interested in having people hang around him and flatter and fawn over him and say what a great teacher he is. Nor is he interested in having him... You could see it a number of ways, having him just sort of be self-satisfied being head of the assembly in the monastery. But he's giving him a challenge. It's not easy to go out and teach, but he's encouraging or pushing him to do this. You could also say his path of cultivation isn't complete until he teaches. Because in this understanding of awakening, part of the awakening is the interlinking sense that you have of all living beings are related to me, I'm related to all living beings. Therefore, I'm compelled to teach. It's not like a vow I'm going to make. It's actually, I cannot but do that teaching because as I see it, as I feel it, the pain and suffering, the confusion of others is palpable in a very disturbing sense. And so it's almost like watching a child crawling to the street and traffic coming. You can't stop yourself from going and doing something here. Mencius used this example to point to what he called the intrinsic goodness in people. Before they think about it, they're compelled to go grab that child from harm's way. In the same way, someone who has an understanding is almost compelled to go out and teach. Because he or she just can't stand to see somebody messing up the potential. So it's like he's reinforcing this. And having realized the Dharma, he returned to these mountains where he spread the teaching and influenced many to change. Really interesting line. Not to follow him, or to believe in the Sixth Patriarch, but to change. And here you have the essence of the teaching. The teaching's all about change. It's not about getting something that you hold on to as much as it's getting some medicine that causes a change in you. So this is the story of Qing Si. There's a follow-up story that I heard about Qing Si later when he was teaching. So he went out, and he got challenged sometimes by his students because he was considered to be one of the Dharma heirs, direct Dharma heirs of Hui Neng. And so people would then come and challenge him. And the robe and bowl wasn't transmitted after this, but the expression they used was, "You got the gold. You got the gold." I mean, in other words, did you get the gold? This is not about, gold jewelry. This is about, did you get the essence? Did you get the real thing? In the Avatamsaka Sutra, it talks about cultivating yourself is like smelting until you get purified and purified until you have pure gold. And purity here means no admixture. So it's a very interesting definition of purity. Purity means that there's nothing that can be added to this. It's 100% just genuine, pure, no admixture. So the disciple comes to Qing Si and says, "Do you have any gold to give to me?" In other words, are you really the teacher? And anybody know this? Okay, so this is wonderful. We do. So what would you say if you're Qing Si? Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. It's sort of like, okay, we hear these exchanges, that's really cool. So somebody comes and says, what's the direct teaching? I'll say, what were you practicing? And say, well, I wasn't practicing anything. And I'll say, so what is there to get, blah, blah, blah. So now you've got a test. If you don't know if you know the story, just excuse yourself, recuse yourself, as it said. Okay? But if you don't know the story, what do you think this awakened master would say to him? Do you have any gold to give to me?
No.
Okay, so no.
You already have it.
Okay. No, you already have it. Okay. Anybody else? I'm not saying good or bad. I'm not going to judge it. I'll tell you what he said, but I just want to see what you would say. Imagine yourselves to be patriarch. Come on. I won't tell. It's not being streamed. Huh?
What gold?
What gold?
What gold?
That would be.
Yeah. Question in turn.
What gold? Okay. Anybody else? Oh, come on. Stick your neck out. Huh?
You have to find it yourself.
You have to find it yourself. Okay. Nobody on this side? Come on. I know you're itching to do it. Nobody? Okay. Don't look on Google. His answer was, even if I had some, how would you hold on to it? Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Now, it's not to say that 100 different answers couldn't get at the same direct teaching, but that particular thing really must have hit that disciple, because even if I had some, how would you hold on to it? I mean, there's so many layers here. I couldn't give it to you, right? Because you can't get it from somebody else. But as you think it's something you get and that you hold on to, just holding on to something, wanting to hold on to something that's already not getting. I mean, it's a beautiful answer. Okay, let's go to Chan Master Hui Neng. Again, another Tang Dynasty heir of Hui Neng. Some put his dates at sort of 677 to 744, which would make him, 70? Is that right? 70 years old? 77 to 44? Help me with the math. I'm not good. I've never been good at math. 70? He dies at 7? Come on, what's 677? 77 from 44 is? Lon. So 644, 44 from 77 is what?
67.
67? Okay, he was 67. There's hope for some of us here. Okay. It says, Chan Master Hui Neng was a son of the Du family in Jin province. He first studied under National Master An of Sung Mountain, who told him to go to Shaoxi again to pursue his studies. When he arrived, he bowed, and the master asked him, "What has come?" He answered, "Sung Mountain." The master said, "What is this thing, and why does it come?" He replied, "To say it is like a thing misses the point." Then the master said, "Then what is there to be cultivated and certified?" And he replied, "Cultivation and certification cannot be absent, but defilement cannot be present." The master said, "Just this being free of defilement is what all Buddhas guard and maintain. You are like this, and I am like this too." In India, the text goes on, and actually, I believe in the Chinese, we did this, it was in the West, but it's west of China, so it was called, that's how they... Prajnatara prophesies, "A galloping colt will come from beneath your feet, who will leave in his dust everyone else in the world. Keep this in mind, but don't speak of it too soon." Hui Neng immediately understood and accordingly stayed on for 15 years as a master's attendant, day by day becoming more immersed in the deep and the profound. He later went to Nanyue, where he extensively spread the Chan tradition. He was posthumously given the title Chan Master Ta Hui, Deep Insight. Okay, so again, in keeping with how I started this is obviously another exchange between someone who is either already arrived at the insights of full awakening or very, very close. And what often these exchanges are about are not so much a transmission of understanding or a new insight, but rather confirmation of already a reached one. So when, and they use the words here, you can see on the next page, cultivation and certification cannot be absent. Certification has to do with both a formal process that takes place, and a formal, I say, it's also existential. When your or somebody's cultivation and understanding reaches a certain point, it's often the case that you go to someone who is above and superior to have that checked out and certified. You don't really, quote, certify yourself. In the absence of those teachers, though, that's all that's left to one. But when there's great teachers around, and obviously the word is out that Hui Neng at Shaoxi is one of those great teachers. My guess is, again, it has to do not with the fact that he was supposedly given the robe and bowl, but that the exchanges that he's having are of such a quality and have such an impact that the word of mouth spreads that this is a great teacher. And by that I mean it's not necessarily he's working miracles, but his way of getting directly at somebody and causing them to weep and open their minds in a way. For people in a spiritual space, this is very rich. This is very vital. It's like going to a very rich source. These are hard to find. And so obviously the word is spreading among these cultivators that he's of this. And so the people that have this understanding, people that are brave who don't and really want to get tested and taught will go. People who already have some understanding want to go and have it checked and verified. This can be done sometimes just by really closely studying sutras, like the Shurangama Sutra can become a certifying mechanism whereby you can test your, but usually that's in the absence of having a teacher. So here there's a teacher available. He goes, he bows in respect. The interesting thing is he first studied International Master An and Sung, who told him to go to Shaoxi. What's going on here? It's a very interesting... I mean, this is really, I think... Well, it says, he doesn't say to go certify, it says to pursue his studies. So here's a little different. It's a little different. He's, I should say, Master An is known as a Vinaya master. And so he is one who is very skilled in the precepts. And I don't mean just the formal precepts of regulations that you behold, but a way of self-reflecting so that everything you say, do, and think, you're aware of its impact on both on yourself and your nature and on other people. So you're constantly in a mindful state of watching your actions, your intentional actions called karma, of the body, mouth, and mind, the three karmas, as it impacts others and yourself. So this is Vinaya training. They're very clear. Clearly, it's not killing and stealing and sexual misconduct and so forth, but it gets very, very subtle because you're watching the effect of your body language, of your thoughts and your emotions, of your unexpressed intentions and so forth, and how this creates a field for cultivation or messes things up. So this is Vinaya training. After he has this deep Vinaya training, then he goes to do Chan. This is very interesting. It's sort of like this is a replication of the three non-outflow studies where you start with the basics of precepts or moral cultivation that then leads you to have a calm and a still kind of mind that then opens to insight. So in his life, he studied, I mentioned once that Jir Dasher, the great Tentai master, did bowing repentances for 20 years before he started to meditate. So this is how serious they took the formative basis of their cultivation, is really the grounding of your human character as being as refined as you can get it. Then you can enter deep Chan cultivation and not be turned by the state. So that's what he's doing. So he goes, and when he arrives, he bows, and immediately though, his studies, he's obviously so ripe that they can have this exchange. What has come, he says, Sung Mountain. Sung Mountain is what they call technically it's called a toponym. You ever heard of a toponym? You've heard synonym, antonym, pseudonym. What's some of the others? And this one's a toponym. A toponym, anybody? You can guess. T-O-P, top name, name on top, Sung Mountain. So he doesn't say, I don't say Marty, I say Berkeley came. Okay, something like that. So he's actually, and this isn't uncommon, to take the name of where you were formed. In other words, his identity is in the Vinaya tradition of Sung Mountain. Where did what is it that's come? Not an individual. You see his answer? I didn't come. A Sung Mountain trainee came. Someone who is formed at Sung Mountain. That's a very different way of thinking of yourself, right? And sometimes when people leave home, they get different names, and the names are to identify qualities that they're either cultivating or accomplished, or need to cultivate. But in any event, their identity turns on this new name. So it's not a name of family or birth or genealogy or even honorific so much as it is a statement of, I am the result of this. It's very interesting. So Sao Shi came, or Sung Mountain came. And then he says, well, what is this thing and why does it come? And to say that's a thing, he says, misses the point. And he says, if there's no thing there, ban lai wu wu, right? Basically, there's not one thing where it can dust light. This is a repeat of that earlier conversation, right? You can see he is saying there is no self and nothing to attain, and attaining nothing to attain is the true self. Oh, I got it. Okay, good. He's ready to go. Because he's not saying he's not even having that identity. This is very interesting because he hasn't been doing much Chan yet. But he's so pure in his precepting that it has had the effect of erasing the false sense of self. He's a person of the way with no mind. Because when you act in such a way as to cause no harm to yourself or others, and no intrusion into that space of the pure nature with yourself and others, that itself is Chan. It's also pure precepts. So he is so pure in this way and so mindful in this way that he is, in a sense, in Chan without even thinking he's doing Chan. This is how wonderful this exchange is. So he's saying, so remember in the earlier set is, how do you say, when the mind is straight, why toil following the rules? And when your steps are true, why worry about sitting in meditation? So he's embodying this. With his mind straight, he doesn't even have to think about now holding the precepts because he is the precepts embodied. And he doesn't even have to think about cultivating because his steps are so true now. This is very interesting because he is entering a door of awakening through cultivation of his character and his person, rather than still meditation. This is a very interesting. So that's why they say when you perfect your humanity, Buddhahood accomplishes itself. It's not the case that you need to then go out and only meditate. or that meditation is the only way to get this. In fact, meditation, according to the Master's teaching, is only for people who can't get it directly. Whoa, okay. So then he says, then what is there to be certified? But now he says this very important line. Cultivation and certification cannot be absent. In other words, I have to get some certification here. But defilement cannot be present. What does he mean by that? What is defilement here? Cannot be present. Guess? Try?
Afflictions.
Yeah, defilement is another word for klesha or fanno. So he's basically saying awakening and accomplishing is not getting various states of meditation, the fourth dhyana, and so on and so forth. It's about having the absence of klesha. This goes right back to the core teaching of the Buddha. It is through the absence of klesha that Buddhahood or Bodhi manifests in and of itself. No other thing. When klesha are gone, just that goneness is Bodhi. That's why it says the afflictions are just Bodhi. Meaning when those defilements and afflictions are turned around, that in itself is Bodhi. There's nothing else you need to do. And that's why it says somebody who's like this is pure as glistening frost. It's pure as glistening frost is the expression that comes out of the Shurangama. When you're pure in this way, there's nothing more to do. Meditation is just another expedient means to get you to be constantly deeply aware of your steps. But when your steps are true, you don't need to do that anymore. This is why this passage is so critical. He's not saying you have to work harder and have a great enlightenment. You have to have a satori experience where the mountains shake and so on. No, he's not saying that at all. He's saying if defilement is absent, that very absence is Buddhahood. Whew. Now, what does the Sixth Patriarch say? Just this being free of any klesha is what all Buddhas guard and maintain. Now, this is a very interesting expression. It's not all Buddhas attain. Do you see? They guard and maintain. Again, dynamic. A Buddha is someone who guards and maintains the absence or not arising of the klesha. And if they stir, they don't follow. And if they follow, they quickly pull it back. And if they don't pull it back in time, they repent and renew. You have a progression of stages. But ideally, one who's a Buddha doesn't even move off that fundamental ground to enter into the defilement. Not because they can't, but because they guard and maintain. And the sense of joy and equanimity and compassion that comes from that state is so fulfilling that they are not by any other thing tempted. Not because, I'm not going to be tempted. It's no, by comparison to what they have in this state of joy and liberation, there isn't any pull, there isn't any lure. That's what they're guarding, maintaining. So this is a very powerful passage, I think. And then you are like this, I am like this too. This is wonderful. I mean, gosh, if I ever had my teacher say that to me. You're like this, I'm like this too. No, it was usually, you're like this, I was like that too. Okay. When I was about 4 years old. Yeah. And so it's basically a sort of, sometimes they say Rushur is just the expression, like this. We're like this together. And this, remember, after he was awakened, he went to, I forget who the Dharma master was, and he said, what did you discuss? And we just talked about seeing, Jian. So here you have a similar exchange. We're just exchanging and confirming that we see things the same way. Okay, and then there's this funny thing that's going on here. It seems to be, the Sixth Patriarch continues, in India, an ancient monk, Prajnapatara, prophesied, a galloping colt will come from beneath your feet who will leave everyone in the world in dust. Keep this in mind, but don't speak too soon. What's that about? Anybody? And nobody told me that. And why does he say don't speak too soon? What is it a prophecy about? Well, forget the galloping colt thing for now, but just what's it a prophecy about? So it's Prajnapatara, who's a sage is prophesizing. It's not like a CBS poll predicted, okay? So this is someone special making the prediction. It's not like, oh, your mom said someday you're going to grow up to be rich and famous. Don't speak too soon. It's not like that. This is obviously a sagely prophecy aimed at who? Obviously, this cultivator, this monk. Maybe not speak too soon. Why? Come on, guys.
Is it the prophesying of the next paragraph here where it says what he does, which is basically he sticks around, does day by day, becoming more immersed, and then later he goes and spreads the tradition.
Does this kindle anything in your mind when you go back and look at what happened to Hui Neng himself when he came in? And he said, why are you here? I just came to be a Buddha. Well, how can you be a Buddha? You're a southerner and illiterate. Our fundamental natures are the same. There's no moment I'm not cultivating. Go back in the kitchen and shut up. Get out of here. Don't speak. And now we have a similar thing happening here. There's a prophecy. This is obviously some pretty incredible individual who's showed up now and is following a pattern. But he's basically, I think, one way to interpret this, not the only way, is that he's saying, stay out of harm's way, because you have to remember, even here, there can be jealousy and fighting about somebody who comes in and has these qualities. So these, it's sort of that energy still, of course it's gone from present monasteries. You never see secular infighting. Everybody's just compassionate and kind and getting along, right? So obviously he's telling him to don't speak too soon of this. And then he stays like the Sixth Patriarch stayed. The Sixth Patriarch worked in the kitchen, increasing himself. He stays for 15 years as the master's attendant. Now, attending on the master is both an honor and a burden. It's not easy to attend to the master because you think, oh yeah, I'm bringing him a towel and bringing him food. No. If he's a real master, every time you come into touch with that master, you're getting burned. You're getting singed. It's not like, oh, it's so good, thank you for bringing me my oatmeal. No, because the master is actually, you're right in the sauna, so to speak, with the master, and the heat is up. I'm just telling you this from my own experience. To be close to the master, everybody says, oh, I love it. No, you wouldn't. Believe me. You'd love it in afterwards as you reflected, and you'd love it before you were there. But while you were there, you're kind of like, I hope he leaves, we gotta get up. So attending to the master means he put himself into the fire and was really being smelted, day by day becoming more immersed in the deep and the profound. Yes, that's true, but day and day also becoming immersed in his own crap that he had to change over to actually become more and more pure. That's what great masters do. They don't say, and now, how would you like another dose of the deep and the profound? No, it was like, how would you like to have your fur rubbed this way? Are you completely smelted here? Are you free? No jealousy, no competition, everything good, So these kind of things is part of the smelting. He later went and spread the Chan tradition extensively. Why the galloping colt? We should finish up on that note. Galloping colt. It's the West. He said he went to the West with a galloping colt. So that was America. No. What's the galloping colt? Some of you know you're just being polite. Come on. Mazu. Ever hear of Mazu? Who's Mazu? Excuse my tones. I think it's Mazu. Is that right? Thank you. Who's Madhu? He's a famous patriarch. He's one of the big Chan patriarchs. He was the disciple of Hui Neng. So it says like this, and he said, a colt will come from beneath your feet, meaning will study at your feet, and this colt will gallop out and have a profound influence. And so this Madzu, I don't want to go into why he's famous and whatnot, but he becomes one of the big-time famous patriarchs in the Chan tradition throughout. And he's prophesizing that his disciple will come from Hui Neng's teaching. So this is what it's about. Now, obviously, someone with those roots and that prophecy, as I was saying earlier, these are not, even long-term cultivators coming in just with a few problems that need to be straightened out. This is an interesting thing because it's sort of suggesting there are levels or streams of the Dharma that come and go and flourish and don't necessarily come from an individual. These two came in almost totally performed. They just got certified and moved on. So it wasn't that they were so much taught by Hui Neng, is that they were coming from a Dharma stream that's going back to other causes and conditions. It's sort of like, if you think about this then, and the Avatamsaka describes it in not just this world, but many worlds. There's Buddhas that have been, there are Buddhas that are, there are Buddhas that are coming into being, and there's Buddhas yet not born, and they're simultaneously coexisting in all these different phases. And so you think, oh my God. So, and because of their vows, they go throughout all these realms of existence. And so right now, there's people going through these various stages happening that may not have anything to do with a particular temple or monastery or teacher, but are coming from deep causes and conditions that go all over the place. It's really quite interesting. But these two come in and not directly being disciples of him, except they get certified and then he sends them on again. It's really pretty interesting. Questions? Comments? Anything?
You're going to tell the story about Matsu and Byron?
I can. You want a story?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so here's a story about Madzu is the young disciple, and Huairong's a teacher. And so, and this is really good. You see in Huairong's formation an understanding that sitting meditation, and you see this throughout this teaching, is an expedient means to help cultivate yourself free from klesha. That's at the heart of everything. So meditation, that's why I said this is very interesting that this is considered a Chan text, and the very, very shortest paragraph in this text is about meditation. The rest is like, where's the meditation practice? Where's the meditation teaching? It's not here. But there's all this, the essential nature is whole and complete, simply cultivate, realize this, and da-da-da-da. So he comes in with all this Vinaya training. He hasn't done much Chan practice, and he gets the certification. The certification wasn't, good man, you just sat for 6 hours unmoving, or 6 days, or 6 years unmoving, and you got it. He says, no, you're free of defilement. I'm like this, you're like this. This is what all Buddhas guard and maintain. Nonetheless, in China at this time, and I would say not just China, but throughout, and perhaps even in Europe and America now, there's people who are thinking that to get awakened means you cross your legs and sit for long periods of time until it happens. And you work through all the pain, and you just sit there and you waiting for Godot, or waiting for Buddha, the Buddha, Buddha. Godot. That's kind of interesting. Waiting for Buddha. Waiting for Godot. Okay, Godot, waiting for Godot. Play. Nobody? Everybody know Waiting for Godot? Ever hear of it? You know it. What is it?
He was waiting for Godot, is this story?
Yeah, it's a play.
And he never came, no?
He never came. Yeah, right. 2 guys waiting for God. Okay. Anyhow, so when he is teaching Madzu obviously comes in really gung-ho to do meditation practice. And I'm telling you, you think that's not true, but it is true today. People sign up for retreats, and they're all set to get enlightened after 7 days, and they just cross their legs and then they watch everybody else too. It's like, she sat longer, he sat longer, oh, maybe they're getting enlightened and whatnot. And they're waiting. They're sitting there waiting, and they're waiting for the teacher to come down and say, Shanzai, or some kind of Chan repartee where they get certified. So that it's very intense that this is still one of the motifs. So Madzu's sitting there on a rock. That was one of the things they did. They didn't sit on these things. Like, if you really want to be a meditator, this is baby. You want to sit on a rock, okay? Now, don't go to Home Kitchens and get one of these nice granite tabletop things. You want to sit on a real rock. And if you sit on a real rock outside, it's like, you bring in a nice rock and put it in your living room. No, it's not the same thing. You got to sit on a rock outside with all the bugs in the wind, and sometimes you got to sit on a rock in the middle of a cold stream. I've seen Korean Zen movies like this. So the guy is sitting there on the rock, and the water is flowing, there's icicles, and so this is part of that whole, I don't know what you call it, ethic, ethos. Anyhow, so Ma's sitting there, and Hui Neng sits next to him, sits right across facing him, and rubbing a clay tile. Now we're talking about a rough clay tile, and he's rubbing it. So Mazu has been sitting there for a long time. Now his teacher comes and sits there, and he's got this unpolished. I'm not talking about the nice clay tiles on the imperial roofs. I'm talking about just unpolished, right? And he's rubbing it like this. And finally, Mazu says to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm rubbing a tile to make a mirror." That's what Hui Neng says. It's possible, right? No, I mean, how do you make mirrors? Do you make mirrors by rubbing tiles? You can go out and get a tile and you can rub it, and it's never going to come a mirror. So he says, "I'm rubbing a tile, and going to make a mirror out of it." And Mazu says to him, "How can you make a tile by rubbing a mirror? I mean, how can you make a mirror by rubbing a tile?" Basically, he's saying you can't. And then, okay, so how many people know the story? Since you asked, you probably know the story.
I've heard of it.
Okay. Anybody else heard of it? Okay, those of you who haven't heard of it, want to give a shot? It's the second one tonight. Nobody? Okay. His answer is, if I can't make a mirror by rubbing a tile, how can you achieve Buddhahood by sitting in meditation? You see the teaching. In other words, sitting in meditation doesn't achieve Buddhahood. The absence of klesha is the achieving of Buddhahood. So he's not saying you shouldn't meditate, or meditation is bad. He's simply saying, if you think meditation in and of itself, long prolonged sitting, and quieting, or stilling your mind, or any of this, has to do with the attainment of awakening, full awakening, it's just like rubbing a tile hoping to get a mirror. So this is a carryover, and it's also sort of like passages in the Shurangama Sutra where it says, going back, if you are not grounded in precepts, if your moral ground is not true, you wanting to get awakening is the same thing as trying to cook sand and hope to get rice. So they use a similar expression. The other one's even more graphic, of taking basically a turd and hoping it's going to turn into sandalwood incense. You can shape it like sandalwood incense, you can form it up really nice, and every time you put it on the altar and light it, it's going to smell like turd, okay? And the idea is here, if that substance is not solid, then it won't turn in. And here it's like, even if your meditation is misguided what you think it's going to accomplish, it's like rubbing the tile hoping to get a mirror. So just a story from tradition. These are illustrative. Did they really happen? Someone's going to ask. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just passing it on. Okay. And again, I didn't do my... I'll keep bringing it down. One of these, because it's really perfect for tonight's thing, but there's just not enough time, so we ran out. Questions? No questions. Announcements? No announcements either? Nothing happening? A couple weeks, there's a Ganyan session at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. Still open to people want to come and cultivate a little? Or a lot? Rub a tile? Anything else? Okay. I will bring the Avatapsika again next week, and if it works in, read you these wonderful passages that I kept promising you about for 3 weeks. Okay, we'll do the transference in English. I'm sorry I don't know the new one. I just learned this one English version and I keep doing it over. I know there's a newer version, but I don't know it. And now all of you are sort of learning an obsolete version. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace, with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.